Hey guys, it's Haley and welcome to another bookish video. Today I'm starting the first of my little wrap-up videos for the end of the year. I always love making these videos so much. If you want to watch my other ones from the couple previous years, I will link them down below. But I absolutely love going through these like year superlatives, and today's video is going to be my top 12 most disappointing reads of 2023. So to be clear, this is not my worst books of 2023. The worst books of 2023 video, which is going to be filled with a lot of negativity and ranting, is going to be coming later on, closer to Christmas. That is my gift to you all. If you don't like ranty content, probably don't watch that video. This is not going to be like that. For me, this dozen was just extremely disappointing. These are going to be like the biggest letdowns of the year, and that doesn't necessarily mean that these were bad books. A lot of these I actually rated kind of high, like 3.5 stars, but I thought that they were going to be better. Like something about them was just a massive letdown, and it didn't measure up to what I expected it to be. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into my most disappointing reads of 2023. I want to start out with one of my first reads of the year, actually, and that is The House on Needless Street. Guys, I really wanted to love this one so much. I had it as like a highly anticipated read of the year. It's why it was one of my first reads of 2023. So many of my friends had it on their best reads of 2022 list. So I had it high priority for this year, and I had a sinking feeling around like chapter 2 or 3 that I knew exactly what the twist was for this book. If you don't know what The Last House on Needless Street is about, we are following 3 different perspectives. A man who seems quite frantic, a girl who is seemingly like trapped somewhere, and a cat who's observing it all. And we're trying to figure out how these 3 perspectives are related. It's a horror book, and it's generally just like thrilling and creepy throughout the course of the book. We're pretty sure that this man has this little girl kidnapped, and the cat just like lives in the house. That's kind of what the book wants you to think, at least. But of course, you know that it's something else going on. And unfortunately, I did accurately predict what that was and how these characters were related, like not even 5% into the book. It's a long book too. I believe it's like over 400 pages. And to have to sit through that long of a book just to get confirmed that I knew exactly what was going on in chapter 2 and 3. Also, this is going to be light spoilers, so if you want to read this, if you haven't yet, maybe skip ahead a little bit. It's not going to spoil the book in any way, but it's like light trope talk. This book uses a plot device that I think a lot of people drag other books for, but for some reason we're all just like overlooking it. In this book, I, as a mental health professional, cannot condone twists around mental health. Like, I can't do it. I really cannot stomach it. It's horrible representation. I don't know why everyone kind of collectively agrees on that, but then puts this book on the best of 2022 list. Like, so many popular booktubers did that. I don't know. I knew what it was going to be. I had the sinking feeling that it was going to be that, and then it was that. And I don't think it's necessarily problematic, but I just don't think it's creative. I didn't enjoy it. Yeah, I still rated it, I believe, like a 3.5 because I like the writing and I think it's effective storytelling. It was creepy. I like the atmosphere. I like the character development and the way the story unfolded, but I wish that it would have been more subtle, and I definitely don't think it needed to be that long or have that particular type of mental health content in it. So I was pretty disappointed in one of my most highly anticipated reads of this year. Next up, we have another horror book, and that is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. And I read this for a booktuber taste test. I always really hype up the books whenever I read my friends' favorites because I just automatically assume, oh, me and my friends are gonna all have the same taste. that is not so. This is one of Deja's favorite books, and I was trying out a couple of her favorites, just kind of assuming that I would love them and really, really like be blown away by them. But this one was just okay for me, which was kind of disappointing. The story structure is also very, very similar to another book that I really liked, so I thought that I would really like this one, but that just didn't work out. I definitely think the writing is gorgeous, but it didn't do for me what I wanted it to do and what a lot of people seem to get out of this book, which is like the deep emotional impact of it. In this book, we are following a woman whose wife went on this underwater excursion. She's like a deep sea researcher, and she comes back like after way longer than she was supposed to be gone, and she's just irrecoverably changed.
Irrecoverably? Why do I think that I said that word wrong? Did I say that?
She is completely different, and her wife is trying to figure out whatever happened to her at this research trip and why she is the way that she is now. It is equal parts like mysterious underwater horror and really slow, heavy grief horror. If you're looking for a really cathartic, grief-centered read, I think you would like this one, but it just didn't have the emotional weight that I was looking for. It's kind of like I was taking it in and I knew that it was beautiful, but I didn't actually feel the impact of it. So it was definitely not a bad book, but it didn't give me what I was looking for. Next up, we have one that maybe I just hyped up a little too much for myself, and that is the sequel to The Cotton Candy Massacre by Christopher Robertson. If you watched my kind of wrap-up videos at the end of 2022, then you'll know that the first book in this duology was actually in my best books of 2022. I love the original Cotton Candy Massacre. I think it's such a fun extreme horror slasher, and I highly recommend it. So of course, because that's one of my favorites, I was really anticipating the sequel, but when I got into part 2, I realized it was completely different. And I really didn't like the direction that it took. It felt like there was no substance to it, like the story wasn't actually getting further along. The characters that we met in the first book weren't being developed any further. It was just kind of like a little offshoot to have fun and not really add anything to it. And I will say that I did have fun reading this book. It was fine. I enjoyed my time reading it. It went fast, but it definitely isn't something that I would rave about like I raved about the first one. So it just really didn't measure up to my expectations, unfortunately. Well, we just talked about a sequel, so should we just go ahead and talk about the prequel on this list as well? I have A Welcome Reunion by Lucinda Berry, and this is the prequel to The Perfect Child by Lucinda Berry, which was, I believe, the first book club pick my book club ever had, and all of us really, really loved The Perfect Child, but we were just dying being left with that kind of slightly ambiguous ending.
Wait, have I been calling this a prequel? Why have I been calling this a prequel?
This is also a sequel. It's just a sequel novella. It's not like a full-length sequel, but yeah, it is not a prequel. It's a sequel to The Perfect Child. What is going on with my brain? Like, I know they say pregnancy brain is a thing. Is marriage brain a thing? Like, I feel like I just got married and everything in my brain is just like scrambled. My whole life has to like come down in the post-wedding haze right now. But yeah, A Welcome Reunion is the sequel to The Perfect Child, and we were all highly anticipating this book because that slightly ambiguous ending left us wanting more. And I thought, oh, finally we're gonna figure out what actually happened with this creepy little child that made her parents' lives a living hell and went on just like this rampage. Well, we are now seeing that child as she's 18 and getting out of jail for the events that happened in The Perfect Child. And I was wanting like Gypsy Rose energy. Like, I wanted that so bad. And unfortunately, it just didn't deliver. It didn't hold up, and it didn't answer any of my questions that I had. Like, I don't really see the purpose of this. I get it's like expanding the story, and I did like the like further character development there, but I wanted some of those essential questions from the original book answered, and it felt like we were just left with more questions than I actually had before. So again, this is not a bad book by any means, but it just wasn't what I was expecting going in, so it was quite a letdown. Next up, let's talk about Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung. This is a little collection of short horror stories, and a lot of the reviews that I was hearing for this book is like, this is so weird, this is so freaky, this is so creepy, and I love like weird, uncanny horror, and especially when it's delivered in like short, punchy stories. So I was super excited to read it, but it just definitely wasn't what I thought I was getting into. The weirdness was like not my brand of weird. I don't like stuff with bodily functions, and there was a lot of that in here, and I was like overly disgusted by it, which if the horror was too much, like I definitely wouldn't have been disappointed. It was the fact that it was not the brand of horror that I like, combined with being really slow, really boring, and kind of like scattered. Like there were some fluency issues in a lot of the stories where if you only have my attention for 30 pages, you better capture it. But things were dragging quite a lot in this collection. And while there were some stories that I did really like, the majority of the book, I was kind of counting pages to get to the end of each story. And a lot of them felt like one note or completely disorganized. Maybe that was like the weirdness, or maybe it wasn't completely coming across the way that it was intended because this is a translated work. But either way, I was pretty disappointed in this one. Next up, we have another case of me just being too good at predicting, and that is Voyeur by J.F. Gonzalez. If you know about my favorite books, then you know Survivor by J.F. Gonzalez is one of my favorite books of all time, like top 5. It is my favorite extreme horror book. It is insane, it is intense, and it has a breakneck pace the entire way through. It also is about snuff films, and this book is by the same author and has very, very similar content, but this is not extreme horror. This was kind of pitched to me as like the thriller version of Survivor. So I was very excited for it, and unfortunately it just let me down. The only reason why it let me down was because I guessed exactly what the outcome was going to be at, I think, chapter 10 or chapter 11. Yeah, like 70 pages into the book, I completely predicted the outcome and was totally 100% right about it. I felt like it was pretty obvious, and if the journey to get to that ending was the extreme horror that I love from J.F. Gonzalez, then maybe it would have been worth it. But since it was a thriller and it was a little bit more low-key, it was a little bit harder to get through. Now, I still really liked the book. It kept me engaged, and I think the writing is really great. The thriller plot unfolds perfectly, but it was just a little too obvious, and it was such a letdown after the shock after shock after shock in Survivor. I was looking for the same thing from this one. Next up, let's talk about If You Tell by Greg Olson. This is a true crime book, and I don't read a lot of true crime. I don't engage with a lot of true crime content, but this was so highly recommended by people on booktube, and it was so highly requested from y'all. Like, so many people wanted me to read this because it's kind of touted as like one of the most disturbing books out there, and I do like reading disturbing content, but something about this true crime book being recommended in that space should have set off alarm bells for me. I don't know why it didn't, but yeah, I just got a really bad vibe from this book. It's nothing to do with like the content and the case or anything like that. It is extremely disturbing material, and it's very important to talk about cases like this. I just felt like the lens with which the book was told from was all wrong. I was looking for kind of more of the psychology behind the crime in this case, and it felt more like a pornographic account of every single horrifying thing in graphic detail that happened to these victims. And to me, that does not a true crime book make. I would read true crime for the psychology behind it rather than something that felt like I was looking like a looky-loo through the windows of a crime scene. I like doing that in the context of fiction and extreme horror, but it just gave me those icky, twisty feelings in my stomach reading that about real life victims. It was just really horrifying. And I know a lot of people say this book is really, really heavy. I totally agree with that, but it's not heavy as in like, wow, I'm really learning something about psychology and like the ways that people can be manipulated and twisted. It was just gross to me. Like, I don't know what I was supposed to take from this because the only like psychological information was all going on in my brain. It actually wasn't on page. Everything on page, I feel like I was left wondering what was the point of me reading this story. I did all the analysis on my own, and the author really just laid out the gruesome facts, and I think it's kind of gross. So that was a huge letdown, especially since it was so highly recommended. And I know some people are gonna probably agree with this, but that is just the feeling that I got when I read it. So don't shoot the messenger. This is my channel. If you don't hear my opinions, don't stick around. I don't need you. Next up, we have Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin, and I was so hyped for this book because I love reading books with great LGBTQIA rep, and this is a trans own voices story. I love supporting trans authors and trans women, so I was really looking forward to this, especially recommending this to trans people in my life and in my practice, that I could, you know, say, oh my god, this is like you represented in a like very cool apocalyptic horror context. Like, I thought it would be so awesome that those stories are being told, and I do think that that was done well. The representation in here was wonderful. You can tell that it's an own voices story. The mental health content, the talk about trauma, the intricate little details of how it is to be in an LGBTQ space in such a weird, horrifying, out of this world scenario like the apocalypse aftermath. That was so cool, and there are so many things like that that I did love about the book. However, it was really hard to get through. The actual like reading experience of it was really difficult. I liked the audiobook, but I kept getting lost in it because seriously, like, you will switch perspective like 5 times over the course of like a 2-page break. Like, anytime there's a page break, you're switching perspectives. So let me just find like a good example of it. Like, you're switching perspectives, 1, 2, 3, 4 perspectives just on these 2 pages, which is kind of crazy to me and hard to keep track of. Again, there were fluency issues, and I found it really confusing to like click into who we were following at what point in time. If there was just like a little name at the beginning of each break to make it clear who we were following, I think that would have gone a long way. But unfortunately there wasn't, so I felt like I was playing catch up the entire time I was reading. And I found myself wondering about the goals and motivations of the characters. A lot of the time, I wish the character development was parsed out a little bit more, and the editing was a little bit better. This is a debut, I believe, and this author has another book coming out next year, so I will be sure to get to it and see if her writing has grown at all, if her editors kind of picked up a little bit more. I'm very excited to read from her again, but this one did disappoint me a little bit. I feel like even just with like editing advice, this could have been so much better because the stuff is in there. Next up, we have one of my most highly anticipated thrillers of 2023, and that is unfortunately The Other Mistress by Shanora Williams. Shanora Williams, I absolutely love her writing. It is just like compulsively readable, so juicy, so scandalous, so good. So I was so looking forward to this year's release from her. However, this was a massive letdown for me. Similar to the first book that I talked about, y'all, we cannot be doing mental health twists anymore. Mental health is not a twist. It is not a shock. It is not drama. It is just really sad. And I hate when a specific diagnosis is used as a twist or a plot device when it's very clear the author doesn't have a rich depth of knowledge about what that diagnosis entails and what people who live every day in that space go through, because it's really not a cheap plot device. It sucks because the majority of this book, like 80% of the way through, I absolutely loved it. I was eating it up. It was just straight up drama thriller about this woman who finds out that her husband has a bunch of girlfriends and she starts stalking them, and she's just paranoid and obsessed with them, and the whole thing is building up to, like, you realize that she's going to take them out. She's going to murder them. And then we find out something about the mental health of one of the characters in the book that completely changes things. And that's when I was completely let down and disappointed. I just can't. As a mental health professional, I can't. Next up, I want to talk about a fairly recent release, and that is The Ankle Snatcher by Grady Hendrix. I really liked this little horror novella. Like, I think I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and it was very, very short. Like, I think the audiobook was like 45 minutes or something like that. It felt like I had a little bit of unreasonable expectation on this one. I just love Grady Hendrix so much. So I think my expectations were a little too high, and I got let down that this wasn't like earth-shattering and just the craziest, most amazing 60 pages I've ever read in my life. It is basically a creature feature about the monster under the bed that will like grab your ankles and pull you underneath if your foot is hanging off the bed at night, which I love that like nostalgic childhood concept being turned into an adult horror novella. But I wish it was fleshed out a little bit more. How much can you really do that in such a short novella length? I don't know, but I know that I was slightly let down because I do love Grady Hendrix writing so much, and I just wanted a little bit more here. Next up, we actually have a romance. This is the only romance on this list. I didn't read a lot of romance this year. For about 7 months of this year, I was in a huge romance slump. But of the romances that I did get to, this is one that just really didn't do it for me, and that is unfortunately another one of my most anticipated books this year, Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert. And I absolutely love Talia Hibbert. I love her writing. I love her banter. And that is all like so true in this book. The writing's amazing. The banter is so good. However, I was let down because I was not completely aware that this was a YA book. Like, I knew that it had younger characters, but I thought that it was like new adult or something. So I was really missing Talia Hibbert's smut. I think she does that so well, and there was none of that in this book, so that sucks. But beyond that, I was really disappointed in the connection between our two main characters. I couldn't feel their chemistry at all. They started off as friends a while ago, and then like throughout the course of high school, they kind of drift into two different cliques, but then they end up reconnecting at this like camp over the summer, and it's like a woodland survival type of thing. The atmosphere was really cute. It was set up to be such a perfect cute little romance, but I didn't feel anything but friendliness between the characters. It just felt like they went right back to being friends instead of discovering something a little bit more. Even their banter just read as like how I talk to my really close guy friends, and a lot of my really close guy friends are gay. So I was kind of reading this as like a girly and her gay best friend the entire book. I didn't feel any kind of sexual chemistry at all. Like, at all. And maybe that was because there was no smut, so it was just harder to like get in that space with these characters. But yeah, I wish that I felt more, and I didn't feel it, unfortunately. And the last book that I have on my most disappointing books of 2023 list is The Only Survivors by Megan Miranda. What a shame that this gorgeous book, gorgeous cover, I love these colors, thrillers was so lackluster. I mean, for this vibrancy on the cover, you would expect the same thing inside, but this was just so one note and so nothing. I feel like I've read this thriller a million times over. This horrible event happens and all these group of friends survive it together, and so they meet up every year to check in on each other, see how they're all getting through after this ordeal. And then one of them ends up dying, and then they all meet up to talk about it, and more of them start getting picked off one by one. Kind of like your basic thriller plot, but I had high hopes for it. Unfortunately, it just dragged so much, and it was so like nothing. Like, I didn't feel anything for the situation. I didn't feel anything for the twist. It's like it would happen and I didn't predict it, but I was like, okay. I didn't feel anything for the characters, nothing for the relationships. Like, it was just like one note all the way through, and I was so disappointed. I've been disappointed in Megan Miranda's releases for the past couple years, so I'm really hoping that I can get back into one of her thrillers at some point, but for now, I will not get my hopes up for next year because I will just feel the same disappointment that I felt with this release. And with that, those are all 12 of my most disappointing reads of 2023. Let me know down below if you agreed and you felt let down by any of these books, or if you had the completely opposite experience. Like I said, I don't think any of these are bad books, so I totally get it if like one of these is your favorite of 2023. A lot of them I think I just built up in my head and they didn't quite measure up. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to go to therapy and read a book this week, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!